My name's Woody. Been with Intuit for a long time, since like 2004. And I do the QBO show still with Stacy Kildall and Richard Ropa. You can find out more about that at radiofreeqb.com. Now, in the handout section, there's a PDF. By all means, download that. And that will just give, there's other slides I'm not going to cover today because I'm mostly going to be in product. So you should have that just as a resource. It's in the handout section. If you can't get it, in the chat area, I put my email address, which is woody_adams@intuit.com. And then we have qbobestpractices.com and then another website too that I put in there. So any questions, you can use the questions box like you've been, like Jose and I think another one. That's where you would ask questions as well. So the PDF will have links to other resources because there's some great stuff in here. We have our product site, tutorials for your clients if you're actually too busy to train them, you know. And then there's some a great YouTube channel that Intuit's put together with QuickBooks. There's an accountant help hub. You can get the In the Know webinar. Probably some of you go to that. It's like an hour and a half every month, and that's like what's coming into QBO. It's always helpful to send someone from the firm there. They can take notes. And then, of course, Firm of the Future site. Main tenets of QBO, and I'm going to be diving into products soon. No file transfer, so that's my favorite, right? Because I grew up on desktop. I've done a lot with accountants, copy, backups, and portables. So being able just to log into QBO, I get that. It's a no-brainer. Okay, so that's that one. Collaborating within the firm. Automating data entry, we're going to look at that today. We're also going to look at the phone app, so mobility, and then the third-party ecosystem we won't look at, but that's just apps, apps.com. And you can always email me if you want to know, hey, what's the best app for construction or inventory? What's the best app here or there? Or talk to your account manager. So they should have that info as well. Because we all know about the best 3 or 4 apps per niche. So sometimes your client wants to go to QBO, but they don't have a particular feature, so you don't want to keep them on Premier, right? So that's where QBO Plus or Advanced with a third-party app can really help, okay? Now, I'm going to be in a QBO Plus subscription file. Most of your client QBO subscriptions, as I've mentioned before, if you've been to any other webinars I've done, is QBO Plus. QuickBooks Online Plus, in my not-so-humble opinion, is akin to Pro, which most of your desktop clients would have been on, right? Even though as accountants, we're using Premier Accountant Edition, Pro is like your just standard desktop product. It's just like sliced bread for accounting, you know, small business accounting software, right? So QBO Plus is akin to that by feature set. There's class tracking in there. There's a light inventory system. There's job costing, which I'm going to show you, or project tracking, you know. I can pass through material, time, expense to an invoice, right? Not just time, which Essentials has, but even material and expense to an invoice. Tag a job, profitability by job or project, budgets, right? So Plus to me is like these core functionality of what QuickBooks Pro would have, okay? So you might have some clients on Essentials, you might have some clients, a handful one day on Advanced, maybe a couple, 1 or 2 simple start, a few self-employed, but mostly it's about QBO Plus, right? Still, my contention there, okay? Now, there is a users limit phenomena going on regarding chart of accounts, classes and locations, and users. Okay, so Plus stops at 5 users. If you need 6 to 25 users, that's going to be Advanced. And I have a slide on Advanced, so you're going to hear more about QBO Advanced. Chart of accounts also caps at 250. Unless you convert it from desktop, then we start post-conversion at 0. So if you have a client that has 300 chart of accounts on Pro and you want to move them to Plus, but they have no reason to go to Advanced, don't worry. Post-conversion, the chart of accounts will be 0, right? So it's like a loophole. It's a good one. And then class location caps at 40, right? So depending if they need more. So if they need more than these, right, you go to Advanced. Okay, but that's where Plus. You can find out more about usage limits under the gear icon in QBOA. You can see which QBO subs that are under just in your QBOA client list, regardless who's paying for it, are at their usage limit or not, or getting close. Or you can see it under the gear icon, accountant settings, you know, in the QBO client file. Now, Advanced, like I said, and don't worry about the January 7th. This is an old slide. I should update it. I'm always just so slow to do that. I always forget. But again, 625 users. Fathom reporting is built in. You launch it from the report center, and that's a lot of KPI and indexing and advisory service type reporting. Batch import of invoices, batch entry of invoices or checks now. So we're adding more batch enter transactions into the advanced level. And then, of course, unlimited chart of accounts, classes, locations, and then this priority circle, like for your client. Like they have their own technical support and training, right? So you can find out more about that at that website. And there are free trials to both sample companies for advanced as well. So if you need that, email me. I'll send that to you. But today, here's what we're going to do. The next 52 minutes, project tracking. We're going to line on the key settings, items, end-to-end workflow reporting, a quick overview of products and services or our items list, particularly two-sided items, because even if you're not doing profitability by project, two-sided items are important, right? And that's only plus and advanced. Automation of data entry around invoicing and bank rules, and then I'm going to end with a phone app because there's a new receipt capture feature and what they can do on the phone, of course, and even taking pictures of receipts, and it goes into QBO into the banking area. So that's what we're going to cover today, but do download the PDF because there's a lot of this other stuff, that you might want to know about, et cetera, and right, so feel free to leverage this, and that's in the handout section. All right, so we're going to skip the polls because I was late on the volume or audio today, right? And I wasted a couple minutes there over your time. So the polls are not really necessary for you. There's no CP for this anyway. But I'm in my client file, okay? And I'm going to go to gear icon, account and settings. Well, first, let me show you this. We're going to talk about project tracking. It is in the left-hand panel, projects, right? And it's a dashboard, and it shows the profit margin, the time against the projects. You can create new projects. These are a lot like sub-customers, right? And you can drill into each project and see, how you're doing. Clearly, I haven't invoiced a lot against this job. I've done mostly expense or COGS. That's why my profit margin is so terrible. And you can add transactions to the project. So this is eventually we're going to go and we're going to look at reports because there's profitability reports. There's this awesome cost of time projection report you got to see. You can track all the transactions already against the project. We're going to use this one, okay? This is my ongoing project I use in all these webinars, okay? However, before we come back in here, right, and we'll go back to the main page of all my projects, and this is really job costing in QBO Plus or Advanced. That's what you need. This won't be in Essentials. I want to go through some key settings that are important because job costing isn't just about tracking projects or profitability. You might only be here because you want to see pass-through material expense to an invoice, right? Or how do you automate that process? What's this two-sided item thing about? And what are the settings that are important to even just see a P&L by a customer, right? So I'm going to right-click the tab I'm on and duplicate it because that gives me another window in the same file, as you already know. You probably know that, but I like to show it. And I'm going to go to the gear icon, account and settings. Remember, gear icon is where all your kind of operational stuff is. Your lists, recurring transactions, which we're going to look at, and just other tools that are important. And, where you go to, where you're invited, and you're probably not doing much with managed users. But account and settings is important in the file setup. When you have a client that needs QBO Plus and their service-based tracking, there are some settings absolutely to consider, okay? Now, here was that usage limit I was telling you about, so you can see how close you are. I don't need to be powering up at all. Anyway, we're going to go to expenses. Now, this is plus or advanced, not essentials. Though essentials, and I bring up essentials because clients are just going to go to essentials because it's more affordable than plus, and they might not need class tracking, right? But essentials, all the items are single-sided, meaning they can only hit one account at a time. And though I can do time in essentials, enter it, even have unlimited time users, and I can pass through time to an invoice. I can't see the cost of that time, and I can't do any profitability tracking in essentials. So for service-based businesses or even like light contractors or whatever, engineers, architects, anybody that would want to see how profitable are my different projects or quote-unquote customers, the jobs we're doing for people. So these three settings are really important to start that. And they've been in QBO ever since I've been in QBO. I started using QBO in 2009, early 09, like January, February, I don't really remember. But these three settings have always been here. So you've always been being able to do some kind of job costing in QBO. So showing items table on expense and purchase forms, track expenses and items by customer, make expenses and items billable. The third one is for pass-through, which we'll show you. Track expense and items by customers for profitability by sub-customer, customer, or project. And then you have items table. Now let's look at what those things are. And we might as well start on like just a bill. This is pretty standard to use vendor bills for job costing, or a check or a credit card expense even, whatever. I'm just going to do a bill just so you can see it. On the cost side, we know we can track customers on invoices and sales receipts. You don't even have to start with an estimate if that's not your client's story. Some people like to start with an estimate because it's like the bid of the contract and they progress invoice against it. You can do that too in QBO Plus and Advanced. Actually, you can progress invoice in all the QBOs, right? But you're going to want to be in at least Plus because of what I'm going to show you today. So let's say there is this particular subcontractor vendor, and what this setting does, show items table on expense and purchase forms, like a bill, is it puts the item details here. So I can choose my item, right, and say they worked like 4 hours against a particular project. And I can, we can do, you know, beyond the basics here, or we'll just do the Bergstein family BBO 2118 job. Let's just do the Bergstein family. So I'm tagging, right, customer project, this setting, track expense and items by customer, right? Not just at the category, which would be the account detail, because you might want to just do that too. Like you might have some cost of goods sold or something, or you did something. Let's see if I got anything that would make sense. Like burden of laborers, fuel costs while hauling, sure. Sounds great. It was $150, and I'm going to tag it to that Bergstein family, right? Now, you can only do this stuff in Plus or Advanced. Essentials won't have ability to add a customer field or a project field, and it won't have the ability to add an items detail section to a bill or a check or a credit card expense, right? So, of course, you know, and also, there's also class and location tracking. That's also a Plus and Advanced thing, right? Not essential. So there's a lot of benefits there, right? But by the way, side note, we're not using class tracking for job costing. Save class for something else. Divisions, departments, locations, states, territories, whatever. We want to use project or sub-customer for job costing, or even just the customer. It's totally up to you and your client, right? So these settings, we just proved it. Items table on expense purchase forms, track expense items by customer. Now, billability. This allows me to pass through, not only tag it to the customer to show on a P&L, to show the cost on a P&L, right? But also to pass this through to an invoice for him later, right? So I done it on a bill. Let's save and close this. It would also be on an expense if you're doing a credit card expense, right? Like let's say I bought a bunch of materials at, let's see, Home Depot. Do I have them? Yeah. And again, not categories, but items. Bought some items that I'm bringing out, some appliances we're going to install later, okay? And we bought like 5 appliances, right? And I'm going to tag it to Bergstein again. Whoop, sorry. Now I'm doing the main customer. You could do a sub-customer or a project too. I just want to make sure that the pass-through time expense, I want to make sure we understand that first. And this is just a credit card expense, right? It'd be the same with a check. I won't show you, but there's that. And then we'll go to time entry a little later, right? Because time's important. Now, there's another form to talk about. Then I'll show the result of the pass-through. We'll go to an invoice for Bergstein just to show you how it shows up. Then we'll go through more of the settings and then into projects specifically for contractor clients or those that are doing more heavier, I would argue, job costing itself. But sometimes it's just pass-through, okay? And it's simple as that, and that's great. So this form, there's 2 forms to consider that you can invoice against. An estimate, which we'll go over later, and that's when I think of like true job costing. I start with the contract. But there's also this delayed charge, and I'd be amiss if I didn't show you this. Sometimes you just want to tag a charge, and we'll do it for the Bergstein family or a project or whatever. Customer, sub-customer, project, doesn't matter. Just so you know what it is, and your client will. Projects and sub-customers are indented under the main customer, right? That's it. I mean, if you're used to desktop, it's the same thing. It's like customer : job, right? Now, delayed charges are non-posting transactions. You invoice against them, and they're item-based, right? Sales forms are item-based. Expense forms have the ability to tag accounts or categories and not just items, okay? But invoice, estimate, sales receipt, delayed charge, I know 2 of those are non-posting, 2 are posting. These are item-based. That's why you need items. That's why we have an items list and why we have two-sided items, which I'll get to as well. So let's say that there is the Bergstein family. I'm charging them for some bookkeeping work or something like that. And it was, I don't know, 8 hours so far, right? I'm not hitting AR or revenue yet. This is really just a charge that I'm going to invoice to later. Now, the reason I'm showing all this is when I go to sales and customers or overview or all sales, whatever, you see this unbilled activity right here, right? I have yet billed it yet. Bergstein family has 3 unbilled activities. You can even see it in the all sales window when I click on unbilled activity, and it'll list out in columns. This is a great window to have up when you're trying to invoice against projects. Bergstein family, right? We have $840 in delayed charges, none in time yet, $350 worth of expenses, and you can create the invoice from here, right? Passing it through. These 3 settings allow that to happen, okay? Now, the other way to do it is to go to an invoice itself, and you'll see the right-hand panel, which is important to point out. When I go to this customer or sub-customer or project, look on the right. The panel opens up, and I have billable expenses. No time yet. I even have an estimate against this from long ago, and then I just have never, invoiced against it. And then a delayed charge. Right? So I can filter by just expenses or charges or estimates or whatever, or I can add everything to the invoice, right? Let's just do the billable expense, this billable expense, and then the delayed charge. Forget the estimate for later. Right? Close the panel. So now I'm actually debiting AR and crediting revenue, the accounts that are linked to this, these items, okay? And then this is a posting transaction. So that's pass-through, material expense. And it would be similar for time as well. Now, again, I know Essentials can do the time piece and pass-through, but we'll get to the auto-invoicing in a second. So I wanted to cover that and those key settings there and what they mean, what they do. And we'll come back to more job costing in just a couple seconds, or a couple minutes, I mean. Now, the advanced tab of settings. A couple things to mention. Yes, you can turn project on. This is when you're really doing some job costing. You're going to track profitability by project. So customer : project. That's what it's going to look like on all the forms and the reports and on your lists. Okay, it's just indented under the parent customer. You can use project tracking for a lot. I have nonprofits that are using projects to track different, grants really, or other things they're trying to track within or they'll create a customer called restricted or unrestricted, and they'll just add projects to it. There's a lot of, so that they don't get over the class limit. There's some different workarounds that are coming out of this whole class limit thing, with QBO Advanced and Plus, and the nonprofit doesn't necessarily want to go to Advanced. They want to stay on Plus just for financial reasons, fiscal reasons. So you can use projects for a lot of different stuff. Today I'm focusing on for service-based businesses and actual tracking a project for one of your clients or customers, okay? So I turn that on. Time tracking. I know this is in Essentials, so that's great, but the other stuff I'm going to show you is not, all right? But I can add service field to timesheets, right? Make single time activity billable to the customer. It's the same kind of thing. You can pass it through if you want. When you turn both of these on, if we go to time, I'll just do a single time activity. There's Clay Adams, the cost rate. I'll talk about that a little more. And we're going to do ongoing project for reasons that I have. Accounting. Actually, let's do tech support. Where are you? Telephone support. That's right. And then, I'm not going to, I could make it billable if I want to pass it through, right? If I want to. And then let's say we did 4 hours. And of course, we integrate with T-Sheets, and that time would come in too, and all that info as well. So it depends on the needs or how sophisticated the needs. T-Sheets is great for that. But that's what these settings do. They put the service field or the item on the time entry, as well as the customer project, and the ability to mark it billable, or profitability by. Now, time is non-posting. Like a delayed charge or an estimate is non-posting, but I'll show you how you can see the cost of time before it goes to a posting transaction. It's pretty sweet. So I'm going to click Save and Close, and it would be the same kind of thing. You go create an invoice, like now I have some time against this particular, right? If I went to an invoice, the time would pop up in the right-hand panel. Right? You're passing it through. So hopefully we've nailed the passing it through part of all this today. Now, I'm not really going over much on class and locations. Towards the end, if I'll just know that this is typically the setup. Like they'll have classes. I have the ability for one to each row in a transaction. Location is really one location per the whole transaction. So I can split lines on a bill to each class, which would help on a profit and loss by class. But the whole bill is going to go to one location. Right? That's the limitation with locations. At a high level, just so you know, and this is important to understand, and maybe I can circle back with it towards the end, but if I don't, there's a good video on our site. If you go to the video section and you're doing a lot of reporting around classes and you're using classes a lot, my suggestion is watch this video. It's 9 minutes long. Source versus target and balance sheet by class. So there is no viable balance sheet by class in QBO. Okay, it's all P&L by class. Balance sheet by location, yes. All right, I go over the source versus target and the reason being, but it's important to know because you're working with nonprofit clients, you know. So if you're doing a lot of class tracking and reporting, do watch that video. Okay. So I usually keep it like this, and most of the people I know keep it like this. Okay. One location per transaction. And classes, you can have a class per line, right? So there's that. We'll come back to automation. Remember I had mentioned, you know, there's 3 components to automation in QBO. We'll get to the bank feed one towards the end, and then there's recurring transactions. But if your client is doing a lot of invoicing against time or material expense, and like this works great for architects, you don't really have to pick and choose what time goes on to what invoice. You just want to make sure everything's invoiced monthly. You could automatically, this automatically invoice unbilled activity, you could set it for like every month on the, you know, last day of the month, you know, whatever it is on a Friday, QBO is going to create invoices against any unbilled time automatically for you. And then you can send them off. It doesn't auto send them, it just auto creates them. Or really, but it's not just time. It's any delayed charges that have not been invoiced yet. It's any expense or material as well as time that you've marked billable anywhere throughout the month. QBO will create invoices automatically on the last day on a Friday. Now that might be too much automation for a client. So I'll show you at the recurring invoice level where you can do it specifically to a client and not just this global setting. But I wanted to make sure you knew it was there, and it's important. So there is that piece to it as well, the automation. So these are the key settings, right? In the expenses, in the advanced, sales setting does have progress invoicing. I suggest you turn that on if you're doing estimates to invoice. And then the last thing I wanted to show is price rules. Even if you're not going to use price levels in QBO, right? It just allows me to choose different prices by percent or amount, or even custom prices in a date range, right? That's all it is. But some people will turn it on, big proponent of this feature, to turn it on even if you're not using it, because the customer list will all of a sudden have this customer type tab. And you can go ahead and create a bunch of customer types. Because you might be using class or location for something else, and you're using projects for something else, but you really just want to see like sales by customer segment or sales by whatever. It's just another reporting arrow in your quiver, if you will. And so even if you're not going to use price levels, which is its own item, which is its own list, I would just turn price rules. I would check the box for price rules in the sales setting anyway, because it gives me this report. It's in the sales section, sales and customers. It's sales and by customer type. So this is like sales by customer segment, you know. Then you would be able to filter by the particular type, and you know, just tracking different, you know, who are my, which based on my segments in the business, because I'm using class for something else. This is just another thing that I could use. what's the total sales per customer type, right? So you assign your customer to the type in the customer record. So I'd be amiss if I didn't mention that one. So you don't need to use price rules at all. Just turn it on for this ability. Okay, and it groups by customer type by default. Okay, on mostly detail reports. All right, so we've gone through the key settings that are important for what we're about to show. Now let's go back. Let me close some windows, and then let's go back to projects. All right, so that's what you need to set up if you're going to really use projects. Now we've talked about time, material, expense, pass through to an invoice. There's that. There's also one other thing, a couple reports, uninvoiced charges and uninvoiced time. Right, this is in the AR section of reporting, like who owes you. Right, click on uninvoiced charges. This is a way to track everything that you've marked billable that has not yet been invoiced yet. So it's a good report to have too. I just like the, either the all sales really or the customer list, because I can just drill down on unbilled activity and then create invoices from here. I mean, this is a great tab to have open if they're doing a lot of pass-through, right? You're creating invoices against stuff that you've incurred on the customer's behalf, and you're passing it through them on an invoice. Time, material, expense, right? Okay. The other pillar of job costing would be true project tracking, where I'm starting with an estimate, I'm going to invoice against it, I want to track all my costs, and I want to see a profit and loss by all of my projects. Quote-unquote jobs. So for those clients, this is what we're talking about now. Here's my project dashboard where I can see how I'm doing across all projects. Now, a project is really just a name of something, like you're going to do, raising barn, and then that's for the Bergstein family. And it's really just a customer : project, and you can put in notes. Now the old way to do this, just so because some of you might use sub-customer method, which was great for a long time, and it was really the true way to job cost in QBO Plus forever before project tracking. But I'm going to show you why now I've come over to the fenced project and then not using sub-customers anymore. If we go back to customers, what you would do is you would create like a new customer, right? And you would name it, whatever the project was, like barn raising, and you would choose, the actual, it's a sub-customer of, a particular, customer. So it'd be customer : sub-customer, and you'd bill with parent. Right? And you just create a bunch of sub-customers and they could be addresses, it could be actual jobs you were doing or whatever, under the parent. Right? And that's how you would job cost. That's the list you would use. Now I'm using projects. Project is the only thing different is that it has more features, which I'm going to just list off here as we go through it. But it doesn't have, you only have the note section. It's not like all the detail fields that a new customer would have, and you mark it as sub. So I think that's the only thing that's lacking, is it doesn't have a separate email, a separate address from the main customer, or different name. It has a different name, but project is really just, you put in a bunch of notes in there when you add a project, right? These are the fields, right? Project, customer, and then the notes. So you could list it in there. So I'd say that's the only thing really missing, but it has way more stuff. It's advantageous versus definitely sub-customers. First off, if you're tracking payroll or not, the hourly cost rate, this tab up here, you notice for all my employees, and I'll show you about the subcontractors later, for like Clay, for example, that's how he had $31.91 as a cost in there. I can enter in the wages per hour, it's a cost to me, employer taxes per hour, cost to me, and even things up to overhead, anything additional. So his cost to the business per hour when he works on different projects is $31.91. Now this is not going to match payroll because I don't include overhead and all this other stuff in payroll, but it's okay. It's more like it allows me to estimate or prognosticate the cost of the time before I actually put it on a posting transaction, because time is non-posting. You can't really see the cost of it until it's on payroll or a bill or a check, right? And there's no project or customer field on a paycheck yet still in QuickBooks Online Payroll, but I still want to see the cost of my time. to make decisions. So this is a fantastic feature. Pro and Premier don't even have this. In other words, they don't have, and I'm about to show you, the time cost report, which is really projected time, the projected cost of the time. Pro and Premier does not have this. Enterprise has a WIP report, but not Pro or Premier. You can't see the cost of time in Pro or Premier of QuickBooks Desktop until you put it on a paycheck or a bill or a check or whatever. So even in QBO Plus, though, or Advanced, I can see that. So if you have employees, you can put in there, use a calculator to put in their cost rate per hour. There's no unit of measure tracking in QBO, as we know, so I'm just assuming per hour. So when they enter time, I can see the cost. So that's one thing that I would give a thumbs up on, certainly for project tracking. Now let's drill into this ongoing Beyond the Basics project. And we'll invoice against it. We'll have a better profit margin eventually. You'll notice even in the expense section, I have payroll expense against this project. So it is important to put in that cost rate. All right. Now you can add transactions to the project: invoice, receive payment, expense, estimate, time, bill. Of course, I don't have to do it from here, but I could literally click on time. Excuse me one second. Just getting some water. Right, we've already showed this earlier, but I can enter some time, and there's this cost rates come in going to this particular project. This is already pre-filled for me, by the way. Right, I'm not making it billable this time because I already have an estimate I'm going to show you, and I'm going to invoice against it, and probably progressively till the job's done or the project's done. So I'm not passing it through. My client, Beyond the Basics ongoing for this particular project, or the client Beyond the Basics, has already agreed to the estimate amount. So I'm not marking it billable. Right. So you don't have to mark things billable. They do default that way, so I'm unchecking in that box a lot, depending on whether my client's using an estimate or not. Okay? And we'll say they did 4 hours, and I can choose the item. We'll say it was accounting in this case. Now again, non-posting. However, when I go into project reports, which is a sub-tab within the project section, I have this time cost by employee or vendor. Again, this is a prognostication of cost report. So you can see my entry for today, 2 entries for today. For Clay, he has $510 worth of cost of the time against the project. You know, Clay Adams, the vendor, has $270, and then Deborah Wood has $256.30. So total, I'm at $1,045.86 of cost of my time against this project. Now, I may have done payroll already. I might not have. It just allows me to make decisions. You know, if I've budgeted using the budget feature, $1,200 of cost of time against the project, then I know I'm getting close. And the job should be pretty close to complete, right? So I think this is great visibility to have. Now the vendor, let's go over to vendors, because, well, what if you're just dealing with 1099 vendors or subcontractors against projects? When I go into Adams Clay, the vendor, not the employee, right? When you edit their record, there is a cost rate per hour, and that would flow over to the time entry, right? So that's important to show. Those are the things you want to have set up in the fields you want to have data in for the project tracking really to be successful. All right, so that's the report. Back to project details, and we'll go over the other reports too. So let's click on the transactions tab in the project, right? So I can see all the transactions against this project. And it's great. It's like a list report. This is the original estimate. Okay, this is my contract. And I've done, you know, it can be anything. I'm using items, okay? If I go to my products and services list, you want to set these up too. And sorry I'm getting to these so late. The items are important. If I look at just my, let's see, category bookkeeping services, yeah, we'll look at that. So 2-sided items. You create your items, you choose either non-inventory or service, typically for job costing, because you don't want to use inventory, because inventory, you don't see the cost till you sell it. Right. So if you're going to use non-inventory parts on jobs, or your clients will, do non-inventory items. For everything else that's service related, use a service item. Okay, and there's 4 subtypes of product and service in QBO: inventory, non-inventory, service, and group, which we call bundle. So you might do a bundle item or a group item, depending. But it's two-sided, meaning the item, bookkeeping, accounting consulting, is $200 an hour going to this revenue account, but it's $50 an hour cost to me going to this cost of goods sold account. Two-sided. I don't have to create 2 items. I create one hitting revenue and COGS. So I could use it on a bill, a check, time entry, what have you, but also use it on the final invoice to the customer. So two-sided items is like my sleeper hit for why someone should consider Plus over Essentials, even for people just doing time material through to an invoice. Even just time. You need two-sided items. All right? Okay. Yeah, so there's the items list. Okay, and these are on the estimate. It's item-based. And you can create progressively invoices against it. I'll do another 25%. I could do all estimates. I mean, the whole amount. I could do a custom amount for each line or 25% of each line. We'll create an invoice for that, right? So against the $7,000 budgeted revenue I'm getting, I'm going to create an invoice for $1,750, right? Now, I like the billable feature, marking things billable, that we've gone over several times already today, as a quote-unquote change order workaround. Yes, Beyond the Basics accepted the original estimate of $7K. However, we had to add more time for something else they wanted to do in the backyard or whatever, or this is a bookkeeping engagement, but whatever the scenario is. And I don't really have a change order feature within QBO, right? So go enter that transaction, but mark it billable so that the final invoice or any of the invoices against the estimate will pick it up, right? And that's really important. So I have $1,950 against this, save and close. You'll notice my margin is now 16.8, so way better than a negative 239, right? And so I just feel like this visibility helps, even knowing that, hey, Woody's just probably not invoiced against this yet, against the estimates, okay? There's also an important report to consider as well in the sales section. Estimates and progress invoicing summary by customer. This is really just an estimate and progress invoicing by project report. Okay. Some use this as like a percent complete, though you can't really enter the percent, but if you look at the invoice column on this report, anything that's not 100%, obviously those projects are still ongoing. They're still in progress. Not a great workaround for not having cost to complete or percent complete, but it's there. I like having the percent invoice column. And then I know what I got. I can see like everything that's been invoiced. So these jobs are all complete, or should be, right? 100% invoice. Shouldn't be doing anything more work on these. But the ones that aren't, like I got some 50%ers and that, right? That's important. I think for the one today, and you can filter by, it's just a specific one. Sorry, we have this, where's the ongoing one? Yeah, see, so this one, I haven't invoiced everything against yet. Yep. So anyway, that report's really helpful too. Now, time activity. I can also see by month all the time against the project and the projected total cost specifically, or I can use that project report itself. But at the end of the day, our goal is, and I still have to invoice against this project and probably do some more expense against it, which I would control and manage from this window. But the end of the end of the day is this project profitability report, which is already a profit and loss, already filtered by the particular project. Okay, let me make sure I got accrual basis. There we go. So my net income so far is $430.86. Right, so I can see not only my expenses and cost of goods sold really attached to the project and the total for that, and my gross profit there, and any revenue so far, but as well, payroll expense. Now, I know a paycheck doesn't have a customer or project field yet. So in the back end, we're doing something there. When we assign the time against the project, when you run payroll, it will assign whatever part of that payroll expense to that project based on your entry to the report. So we are tracking that now. That used to be one of the gaps. You used to have to do a $0 check or $0 journal entry to tag payroll expense to a particular sub-customer or project, now you don't have to do that anymore. So, and that's the goal, getting to be a P&L. So that's project tracking and pass-through time material expense. Remember, if that's all you're here for today and you're just doing some invoicing against time or something, remember that global setting as we move on to another feature here soon. It's in the advanced tab for automation, right? I'm going to show it to you one more time. The ability, where are you? Are you here? There we go. To, invoice weekly or monthly. Just QBO will create a bunch of invoices for unbilled activity. Okay. So, and I do that, and what it looks like, you'll see, oh, come on, get out of there. I don't know why. There we go. This invoice today is the 148, where are you? Let me see, where was it? Which one? Maybe it's that one. I was looking at it earlier this morning before the webinar. You'll see these invoices that were created automatically, and they're linked to something, like a charge or something. And if you look in the audit history, the user who entered it is the system administrator. So you'll know when you see this in the audit log report or something like that, like, hey, a system administrator added this invoice, you're like, what? Who's that? That's probably because it's either a recurring transaction, which I'm going to go to next, because we want to look at automation now, a recurring invoice, or they have that global setting turned on. Okay. Now, recurring transactions, as I've mentioned, to really tie this whole project tracking pass-through time material expense story off, and we'll move into bank feeds and mobility and other things. We got about 15 minutes left, and we'll end right about on time. If I go in here for Rafal, because you can create recurring transactions for almost anything, right? I mean, except for a received payment, bill payment, or a paycheck. But a bill, a check, a journal entry, you're doing this for like prepaids, right? You're creating just recurring transactions. We call them memorized transactions in desktop. We call them recurring transactions in QBO. It's in Essentials and up. And this is what you're doing already, just to kind of automate. I was working with a nonprofit yesterday in the afternoon, and I was showing them like some basics of QBO, and for like utilities, telephone, or rent, we just set up like recurring check, or recurring credit card expense. Well, really, it's debit card, but you know what I mean. Either way, recurring expense form, so that she doesn't have to go create it every time. All right. So you can do this for invoices though too. I click edit, and for Rafal, one of my highest paying customers by far. The beauty of both sales receipts and invoices is when you set them as recurring, once they're created, there's this top checkbox to automatically send. So they get emailed to the customer. But invoices, and I wish sales receipts did this, because it's not always about accounts receivable, but at least in this case it still is, include unbilled charges. So if the global setting is too much automation for a client that does a lot of pass-through to an invoice, then just have them set up a recurring invoice for every client that you want to send an invoice automatically to. And not only does it charge Rafal or creates an invoice, a customer invoice that he pays, I think our terms are 30, net 30, so every month, $5,000 because he rents this farming auger equipment, which is ginormous, every day. So it's $5,000 a month he pays us, plus any unbilled activity that's been assigned to him. We do other stuff for him too. So it's rarely ever does he get an invoice for $5,000 only. It's usually 55 or 57.50, So remember this, if the automation setting is too global of automatic of a thing, and you need to have more control about which clients get invoices based on unbilled activity, we'll create a recurring invoice. That's the moral of that one. So I want to make sure you knew about that piece, and then we've gone over projects pretty well. Don't worry about the reporting with projects; it's right in the project itself. But you could always go to a P&L and filter by a particular project. But I'm not using sub-customer anymore, unless it's for just pass-through. Then I will. But if I really need to see a report or profit margin or a payroll expense against, then I'm just using projects now. No longer am I using sub-customers, which is fine because it shows up exactly in the customer list as sub-customer would. It's indented. Like this is a sub-customer. But you don't, when I drill into beyond the basics, I'll see a bunch of projects here, right? I can look at all statuses, right? So I have a lot of projects against this customer, right? It's its own tab. And then you just drill in, it takes you to the thing, it takes you to that center. So I like how we consolidate everything in one window, and I think that helps for those of your clients that are doing a lot of this. They want to track projects. It's nice to have a project center and an individual or specific one by project. Okay, you manage everything, including adding transactions to from here. Not that you have to, but still, it just makes it easier. Less possibility of making mistakes. Okay, so the next thing, we are at the next in automating data entry, and then we'll look at mobility. Banking. Now, Valerie Heckman, our colleague, does a great bank feed reconcile webinar. Let me take a quick break and just go back to this website. The group webinars here section at qbobestpractices.com, it has all of our group webinar series. But you should definitely watch the bank feed and reconcile one. I know it's 51 minutes long, but if you're doing a lot of bank feeds, it's so thorough, and I think that's going to be most helpful. What I wanted to mention in terms of automation is that when you're creating rules, like this Toyota rule or something, it's an auto loan, right? And you're creating this specific rule because you want to make sure it's always categorized to the same account, and the nature of rules in QBO is based on like this criteria, right? When a transaction meets any of this, we're going to do this, right? But what's important is this ability to automate. How do you want to apply the rule? So the story with bank feeds is you're going to set them up for checking and credit card accounts and all that stuff, and you're going to be most firms that I visit or we do webinars with, they're going through the bank feeds and they're tagging the appropriate accounts and categories and classes and all that stuff, and they're entering the data from the bank feed. And they try to get it so everything's green and you accept it in batch and all that stuff. But there are going to be some transactions in the feed that don't really need to be reviewed or wondered about because they're always the same every month, and you just want to put it in the register. So how do you want to apply the rule? Mostly we default to auto-categorize and manually review, meaning it's still going to be in the for review tab. It's going to be turned green and stuff. However, you're going to want to look at it before you accept it into the register. But there is this other bullet point to auto-categorize and auto-add. So the rule will be applied when the feed comes in, when it meets the particular conditions, and then we'll put it in the register for you. That's what that one means. I have an example of it. I think it's Google advertising. Let me go to my rule list. Yeah, this one. And this is the icon when that's turned on. So you'll see I have, when it's like $40 a month or something, $39.99. I don't know, some fee or whatever. It's ridiculous. But anyway, I auto-categorize and auto-add. And what that does, if I go to my vendor for Google, let me search them. All their transactions, these are all expenses, all around the same amount. I might want to get with my client on this one a little. They don't look as consistent as it used to be. But when something's added from the bank feed into the register, like transactions created from the bank feed, right? You've accepted it in, or it's matched to something, you'll have this online banking matches in the upper left, particularly if there's a rule applied. So 10/21/18, it was a debit, $40. Google Pay automatically added with rule. Now, if it says manually added a rule, that means they literally accepted it from the for review tab of the banking window. But when you see automatic and it's a mistake or something, or you're wondering, hey, why does this keep getting in here? And I have no idea. They're putting it into the wrong account. And while I know I have the batch or classify tool, right, to change accounts and stuff when my client miscodes it, how do I prevent this from coming in all the time? And it's probably because they bullet pointed automatically add, right? Not just automatically categorize, automatically add. So you would just go to the rule, and if that's a mistake, and change it to this one. Or just don't have the rule apply anymore. You can literally suspend the rule if you want. So stuff that doesn't need to be reviewed, make it auto. But firms all over the map with this, and mostly firms are telling me, yeah, we don't do that feature at all. We just need to have more control over what's going in. We want to make sure at the end of the day, we can go to this for review tab or go to everything that's recognized and review it and then batch accept it. Okay. Your clients probably like that, that auto add. I've seen that more as the case, but it's good to know. I want to make sure you knew about it. All right. Lastly, I wanted to show the phone app, mobility, for a couple of reasons, right? The new receipt capture, I'm going to take a picture of this Costco gas I got yesterday or something, or a couple of, anyway, it doesn't matter. And then the ability, because you might not use the phone a lot, though we have done a lot for QBOA in the phone, and optimized a little more recently, so you might, but you're probably doing like me, most of your work at a desk or at home or something, and you're in front of your laptop, right? You're not really on the phone. But clients love the mobility piece of QBO. It's a great way also to get them on board with QBO if there's no reason for them to stay on desktop, right? But they're not really sure. Clients always have this in common. They all have a phone, and they'd like to be able to see a report or something like that. So, or do transaction entries. So hopefully you're seeing this and it's reflecting. If it's not, by all means, let me know in the questions box. But hopefully you're seeing it. And this is what it's about. If I click the plus sign in the lower right, these are the transactions that are supported or features supported currently in the phone app. I'm logged in just as a client would be. Okay, so we might not be using it, but our clients will. I can create estimates. I can even get a signature. I can invoice. I can receive a payment. I can do a sales receipt. If accounts receivable is not relevant or necessary, I'll do a sales receipt, right? And I can track expenses, trips, even mileage tracking. I'll try to show a little of that. And then the receipt capture. Now, I'll come back to this later. There is a dashboard, right? I can see a P&L. I can't really drill down a lot, right? And I can do some banking activity. I can go work, click 52 for Amex, and I can start swiping in. Sorry, this is taking a little bit. There's new transactions. This is the Amex, and I can just start swiping and to accept. See, this is going to put it in the register. So I can do some bank feeds from the phone, right? And you could actually look at all the recognized ones and click accept all at the bottom. So there's that. You can do some bank feeds. Also, if I click the 3 lines, it's going to show, I'm in this file, Cloud Collaboration, the same one we've been in all morning. We'll get the receipt capture and mileage, but I can see my items list. I can see customers and projects. I can even go to customers, and I think Aaron has it. I can GPS them. Right? So your customers, your clients will like this, even if in the firm the staff doesn't necessarily use it per se. Right? So I got my customer list, the GPS tracking, vendors. Now, I wanted to mention, since in the theme of job costing, project tracking, or pass-through expense to an invoice, as well as capturing receipts. And you might like this part of it, but there is an expense where I can enter an expense, and there's a phone icon. I can take a picture of it. I can tag a project or a customer. I can mark it billable, choose the account. It enters the expense, credit card or a check, debit card, whatever, into QBO. What is new, though, what I want to show is this receipt capture. Whoops, sorry, let me go back. Receipt capture. Up here, right? Or it's on that home page. You can literally take a picture. Here's my Costco receipt. And then take a picture of the receipt. It's going to capture it, so I have it later, and click Use the Photo. Came out well. And it's going to upload it. Now, it's not going to create the transaction yet. It's just taking a picture of the receipt. So you can do that a lot, or your clients will just say, hey, every receipt you get at Lowe's, Home Depot, when you're going to get gas on the way out to the job, whatever, take picture, use this receipt capture feature. They can even do it right from the home page, this plus sign, right at the bottom right. When you click it, right, receipt capture is one of the options. So they would just hit it from there, and there it is. Take a picture of receipts. Because they might not know how to categorize it. I might not know. You're my firm, but at least gets the receipts in, and then I'll show you what you do. Now, I wanted to go over mileage too real quick, just so you know. It's I can put in a distance, business purpose, starting point, ending point, right? I have it turned on so that when I'm driving and the phone's in the car, it automatically tracks it. So these are the unreviewed trips so far that I've taken. I mean, mostly you see I'm always going about the same amount. Typically, let me go back to the oh yeah, that was when I was traveling. Like home, it's always about 17.83 miles, typically into it, around 18 miles, you know, and I track that. And I have auto tracking on, right? So you can turn it off, you know, if you're going places you don't want it to track, or you can turn it on. I have mileage settings. You can manage vehicles, which is one so far. So it's a lot like it's exactly like the mileage in self-employed, but we have it in QBO. Now, let's go back to here. So now accountants can't see the mileage yet from QBOA. But I'm going to go in, and hopefully you're all doing this too. You create other Chrome users. We might go a few minutes over because I want to go through receipt capture. But let me just knock out mileage quick to what your client can see. But I create other Chrome users so that I'm in different QBO files with the same login. And I isolate QBO into its own user. So in Chrome, you can create people, right? And I have a lot. You probably need 2 or 3. But it helps isolate QBO, you know, because you're using Chrome for other stuff, not just QBO. All right, I'm going to go into the file as a client would. Now, their mileage is different. They can choose between personal and business. I can't really job cost the mileage yet. It's still version 1. I mean, accountants can't even see it, right, coming in from QBOA. But, you know, I can choose, you know, see, mostly it's you know, whenever I'm driving my Scion, this is, you know, it tracks the mileage. And I can choose between personal or business. Right, so this one was personal, you know, etc. And then, you know, this one was business. Yeah, so you can choose between personal and business. But there's no real, like, accounting yet with it at this point, right? But it's just tracking mileage now and estimated mileage deduction. I'm waiting for when we can choose a particular account, expense account, or cost of goods sold, if you will, and tag it to a project, right? Or pass it through, right? You're passing through your mileage that you drive out to a particular client to the final invoice, right? All that will be coming. But right now, it's just really just tracking the mileage between personal and business. Now, receipt capture, and then we'll end. You'll notice there's a third option. You've probably seen it under banking menu called receipts. Whoop. Let's go in through. There we go. As from QBOA, right? Not as your client. Your client would see it too. And there's the Costco one, okay? This is the one that we just did. It takes a while. They can even email it in to receipts@quickbooks.com. You can manage your senders, or you can drag and drop from the computer. But I just think it's most exciting with the phone piece. So take the picture. Now we're going to review it. Notice this is the picture we just took, right? The 2886 of gas. Now, sometimes a payee comes in, sometimes it doesn't, right? And it's going to just guess on an account, right? Beer, but I think it's more mileage. But it is OCR technology, so it's reading the Costco and it's putting in the description field and the amounts there as well as the date. But obviously it's not going to know the bank account or the you know, the P&L account, the offsetting account, if you will. But I'm just going to click Costco here. So I often have to do some work on these, as you've probably seen this too. And we'll say this was like the Amex, okay. And then the account is, let's see, gas, do I have that? Gas and oil. But, you know, there is an ability to do additional fields. I can mark it billable, choose that particular project, right, that we were working on, and et cetera. Class tracking, stuff like that. Okay, but you are going to need to fill in some details. And then when you click Save and Next, if there is a match or something that's already in the register, it'll find it, and then you can match it to that. But I'm just going to click Create Expense. Now, it's actually going to create the expense in QBO, but it'll have the receipt attached. So that's the piece that I like. It'll have the receipt attached, right? This one right here. Fastest way to find a transaction just went in, left-click search field, okay? And then at the bottom, I have the receipt, right? So anyway, receipt capture, it's a new feature. I just want to make sure you knew about it. And the mobility, I think, is important for clients. That's what excites them about QBO, even though we might not necessarily use it. All right. So I'm going to open the floor up for any questions. I'm going to keep it open for another couple minutes. Do download the PDF. Again, you can email me at woody_adams@intuit.com if for some reason there's further info or you have a question or something like that, or you can't download the PDF. I'll stop sharing and I'll stop the recording